I'm just trying to say, I was walking around Paris today, and it feels like the death of civilization. I have to tell you.
Serious?
Yeah, I don't want to get into details.
No, you should.
I don't want to be overly politically incorrect, but I mean, it's just, it's quite terrible. The same problem you see in New York, you see in London, you see in San Francisco, you see in Chicago, you see in LA, even Austin, Texas.
Are you saying the safe zones where you can't go if you're
just overwhelmed with an immigrant population that's uneducated, unacculturated to the fundamental values of where they are? I'm not even quite sure they know where they are, and that's a terrible thing to say. But I mean, goodness, it doesn't feel like French society anymore. It doesn't feel like Paris anymore.
No.
Okay,
there's no attempt to assimilate as well. I mean, we see that in the United States that people don't know the basics, about why America fought for liberty against Britain. Who's George Washington?
Yeah.
What's the Constitution? What's the Bill of Rights?
Yeah.
It's like offensive to have people learn the culture of their adopted country,
Yeah, I know.
So
it's
like,
madness. How dare you? Like, how dare you ask?
Right.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's not only that, but it's just nothing but everything is, quote unquote woke, which is really unwoke culture.
Right.
I mean, and the advertisements are perverse to say the least. Oh, they were advertising, what is the name of that Netflix program? I think it's Sex Education. And they were like showing, they were showing human anatomy in the worst possible way without even without any even advertisement, just like the backside of a person. Okay. I mean, fully the backside of a person. Okay. Can you believe that? Okay. As a poster at each metro stop. I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, overt sexuality definitely is part of it.
But
it's so funny.
Get the graphic that I'm giving you. It's unbelievable. And what do you think that plays into? That plays into, okay, it's bad enough if it's sex outside of marriage. Okay, I don't want to sound too prude, but I mean, if it's bad enough promoting that amongst everyone, but at the same time, obviously, they're promoting homosexuality. What else are they promoting?
Yeah, and just a simple premise that there's a knock on America. It's okay to put down America, but then the question is, why do people want to come here? Or why is there a group of people that want to get illegals here? Or have them be here, And, it's funny you say that because Tucker Carlson was talking about the New Way Forward Act that protects criminals from deportation. And he said the immigration reform bill is the most radical single piece of legislation we've seen proposed. And talk about some of the things about it. It's pretty scary. For example, if the bill, it's just been proposed, but if this bill passes the House and Senate, signed by law by the president, it's not going to pass. But just the fact that they put this out there will be no longer any crimes that automatically require deportation, none. And one crime, falsifying a passport, would be made immune from deportation no matter what. Because apparently this person saying 9/11 never happened and we don't no longer care about fake government documents. But wow. Because under the current law, let me just say this, under the current law, immigrants who commit serious crimes such as robbery, fraud, or child sexual abuse must be deported, regardless of the sentence they receive. Other crimes, less severe, ones like racketeering, require deportation as long as the perpetrator receives at least 1 year sentence. So under the new Forward Act, crimes of moral turpitude are eliminated entirely as justification.
No, I'd say there's only one moral turpitude, and that's actually criticizing something like that. Then it's hate speech, right? Then we're censored, right?
I mean, if you're not
apocalyptic nightmare, right?
If you can't realize that what Obama said 11 years ago is coming to fruition to change America forever. I mean, that's definitely what's happening. That study that came out.
Actually, this is from the words of our beloved French twins over here in France. But they came up with the idea, which is a nice term, of progressive degeneracy. That kind of
sure.
Have you heard that term before? The other one is managed.
No, I did not.
Managed decline or managed destruction of a society. That's what's happening.
Yeah, and it's almost like a push for Marxism, where they want everyone to suffer.
Yeah.
I mean, let everyone suffer. That's a new way to be.
Yeah.
So,
well, let me just say, do you know anything about Agenda 2030? There's a lot we can talk about here, but we should talk about the universal basic income proposal that doesn't seem to go away. The gift or ungift that keeps on giving in the wrong way. That just doesn't die, if you're going to say.
Yeah.
Even with Andrew Yang's presidency now over, he's now vying for de Blasio's position. And the idea of pushing the idea of a universal basic income for all New Yorkers. God knows how that's going to be pulled off. I can imagine. Tax the rich to death. I mean, what else? And tax the rest of us to death. And all with the externalities, which is to say unemployment, slow growth that's accompanied with that. Anyway, and more than that, the perpetuation of poverty. Now, that's a big problem that no one ever talks about. I mean, it seems to be clear enough. We know that as Reagan said, that governments don't solve problems like poverty; they only institutionalize them.
Sure.
Which is to say that we almost invariably have a problem of moral hazard. That the more you help the poor, and it breaks my heart to say this because I care very deeply about that, the more it creates certain incentives for people to remain in that position or even
not only remain, but to grow in that situation.
Which is say, you get a collective downward spiral depending on the amount of intervention, the amount of positive reinforcements that a government gives, and taking away certain negative reinforcements. Of doing things that are more responsible and a more reasonable conception of being a citizen in a democratic republic. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Just like we could talk about the abortion issue or poverty, it takes away responsibility. This is not a knock on humanity, but when you see someone walking down the street with 4 children under 10, you know that I am being taxed to support this. Okay. I've been responsible in that I haven't had children. My income has been up and down, or whatever you want to say. It wasn't the right time. I hate to interject my personal life, but poverty only mushrooms when you say it's okay that you can't afford to have a child or a second or third child, but you have one because there's an incentive to have one. So this whole poverty issue has mushroomed. There's victimization, and there's no standards for behavior. There's actually a positive reinforcement for behavior instead of someone having to struggle for a bad decision. So when we talk about Andrew Yang, and I don't know exactly about it's $1,000 a month to each household, I guess that deserves it. There's been trillions of dollars spent on the war on poverty. There's been numerous safeguards. We hear as though people are in the streets of Manhattan and dying of blood pressure, and there's like 50 or 60% of the population dying that way. But there is something called Medicaid, where people get free services. They might have to pay a little something, but you can't be perfect in a society. When I was following many of these artists, I'm not going to name any, but they had Section 8 housing, they had food stamps, and they were living okay. They would probably living with all the benefits and free medical equivalent to making $80,000 a year or something. If you think about it, in an apartment, maybe $60,000.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about Agenda 2030?
I don't know about it.
I've heard about it. These lofty goals scare me very much, which is just an excuse for more governance.
Sure.
More government. And recreating the world, in the vision of from Bernie Sanders to Karl Marx, everyone in between, and every lefty. But essentially, this is the beginning of their statement about this. This agenda is a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity. It also seeks to strengthen universal peace in larger freedom. We recognize eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, is the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development, and blah, 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 blah. But essentially, we're talking about redistribution of income. We're talking about the lowering of borders. And and I think part of this, but certainly related to this, is the UN Migration Pact, if I got that right, that the United States, thank God, under Trump rejected. not that it means much, that France accepted, much to the chagrin of much of the French population. And that's been calling, have you heard about this? Calling for within about 50 years, I'll get the details later, of migration to the United States of like 500 million or maybe 700 million more people, and like 300 million more people or 400 more million people in Europe. I mean, it's just absolute.
And then you know what? Then maybe
so I don't know what to say here. I mean, it's just crazy at some point.
Right, they come
As
to
James
America.
Carville would say.
Well,
we lost our minds. Referring.
Well,
to
maybe they could come to America, then we go to their countries. We could do a switch.
I was thinking about that.
Madness,
Yeah, I wouldn't mind living in
total
Tanzania.
madness.
I wouldn't mind.
And then this country will be, run down, and they'll come back to their home.
No, that's not a bad idea. I wouldn't mind like taking the endowment of Harvard and recreating Harvard in Tanzania, something nice like that. In Zanzibar. That's not a bad idea. What do you think?
May I say one thing? We are talking about the Pope. This is from Breitbart. Tax the rich. Pope Francis calls for the global wealth redistribution. Yeah. And there were some quotes of what he said, and many of them are just false, outright falsities. He says, during his discourse, the Pope repeated his conviction that poverty is on the rise worldwide and the poor increases around us. That's just not true. By every academic study, it shows that it's not true. And we could go into Steven Pinker's book, which we will, Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science, and Human Progress. Yeah. The Pope also said, with the passage of time and the advances of civilization, the number of poor people increases rather than diminishes. I'm paraphrasing. He asserted that the poor are always poorer, and today they are poorer than ever. That's also not true.
Yeah, it's simply not true, right? Do you have the
no, it's simply not true.
Do you have the actual statistics on the eradication?
Well, I have something. The Brookings Institute says, the Brookings Institute says, noted in late 2018, the world is currently experiencing the lowest prevalence of extreme poverty ever recorded in human history.
Look at that.
Less than 8%. Yeah. And that number falls with each passing year. And according to the widely used international poverty line, people are considered to be in extreme poverty if they live on less than $1.90 a day or its equivalent. So in the world today, this is from the Brookings, less than 10% of the global population lives in extreme poverty. Whereas just 30 years ago, 1990, some 37% of the world lived in extreme poverty. So 2 centuries ago, nearly everyone lived in extreme poverty. In 1800, he says 90%, this is Brookings Institute, 90% subsisted on less than $1 a day, and it's just basically not true what the Pope is saying.
So what? You got to go beyond that. What accounts for the dramatic reduction of poverty over the last 20 years? It seems, right?
Yeah. We talked about free markets.
Thomas Pogue was championing. I think he called it the Millennium Goals, right? Which was connected to the United Nations initiative, to dramatically reduce poverty in the new millennium. So what happened? So tell me. I mean, so what do you think made the difference?
Well,
you're taking saying like liberalization of economies has that taken root over the last 20 years? Yes.
Well, I mean, we use China as an example that we were recording yesterday. China as an example in 1970, believe 99% of the people were living in poverty, or 95%. That's down to about 20% now, around those numbers. And what has happened in China? I mean, what has happened in China? Nixon opened up China for trade. Yes. China, and I know intimately from people that I associate with, China has
a Chinese girlfriend here.
China has become the assembly line to the world. Yes. And what does that mean? Yeah. That means there's been growth in that sector, where you might get an iPhone with American products, but it's made and assembled in China. Same thing with fishing. You might get fish that you get in the Pacific, but in China, they'll clean up the fish, then package it and resend it. So there's been jobs that have been created in China, and it's because of capitalism, not communism. Bernie Sanders just lied again when he said China should be a perfect example of what America should be, and he touted the 800 million people out of poverty in the last 30 years. Yes, that's not because of socialism, Bernie. That's because of the free markets.
Right.
Same thing could be said about South Korea as opposed to North Korea. Look at the growth in South Korea. I mean, everyone in America is now driving Hyundais and using Samsung TVs. And the phones as well. So when you open up markets, you give people an ability to create, ability to own property, an ability to flourish, where they could see that there are benefits from what they create. You could compare North and South Korea. Let me just say one thing about the World Bank, the same article. Per capita income worldwide has been increasing dramatically year by year. And in 2018, it was about $18,000. Global per capita income has increased by over 200% since 1990 and is more than 3 times higher than its 1990 level of about $6,000. Now, this doesn't suggest that poverty is not a problem, that poverty reduction is not worthy and important goal. It does mean that global poverty is not increasing, but is decreasing rapidly. Free market economies that favor wealth creation, such as the U.S., extreme poverty has all but been eradicated.
Changing from the descriptive side to the normative side of these arguments. Let me ask you, what obligation do you think people have to what we call distant strangers? That is to say, those who are not part of your own political project. Would you say not part of your own political?
I had this in ethics class.
Not a citizen of your own state, or would you say not even a person?
The spatial difference matter.
So exactly. So simply by dint of someone being somewhere else on the globe, does that actually negate the obligation we would otherwise have to that person to bring that person out of some a crushing instance of poverty? Now, I mean poverty in a absolute sense, not in a relative sense. What we call situations in extremis. Say those who suffer from terrible situation of, for example, victims of warfare or victims of a natural disaster, of famine, of disease, but also those who are just cannot, for the life of them, for whatever reason, from corruption to bad political cultures, bad political institutions and economic institutions, cannot get themselves out of poverty.
I think we do have an obligation to help.
This is one theory, maybe because they're burdened by malaria, that I've heard that theory before, and so on and so forth. Climatic type problems. What obligation do we have to feed them and to take care of them and to bring them out of that situation?
I think we do have an obligation to help, and by helping them, it will help us as well. So, we brought up George Bush. I believe he had an initiative on AIDS where he put, I think, $50 to $100 billion to eradicate AIDS in Africa. But that is a very daunting concern, because how do you build up these countries? I mean, there's a lot of corruption. These people have a long way to go. They deal with issues that are unheard of in this country, of course, or in the West. So where do we go? I've heard China's investing a lot of money in some of these African countries. I don't know if that's helping the average person. Possibly not. But you have to start with rule of law and consistencies. And I've heard, excuse my limited knowledge, there's so much corruption in these countries. I think Silicon Valley, like San Francisco, I'm sure. New York.
Corruption is like the primary problem. Absolutely. If you look,
how about those micro loans? Those seem to be.
If you look at the corruption index, the annual corruption index, you always see at the very bottom, lo and behold, that certain countries that you expect to be poor, that are poor, and they actually, and they're both poor, and they have the highest index for corruption as well too. And the ones that
what's number one around there?
Like Somalia.
Eritrea.
I think it's like Somalia and Yeah, Eritrea, perhaps Ethiopia, Eritrea,
Unfortunate.
the Congo, Afghanistan. In terms of Muslim countries, is almost always. I'm sure it's Syria now because of the warfare in Syria. I mean, it's terrible. It's absolutely horrible. But the thing is, even if $2 out of every three is going to go in the hands of some corrupt element, do we have a moral obligation where we sit rather comfortably? Look where we're sitting now, New York and Paris. Do we have a moral obligation to give and give until it hurts, to the point of getting them at least much of the population, not all of the population, out of a situation of extremists?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you want to preserve life now.
Like famine relief in Ethiopia, remember? We are the world and such.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
So you think we did?
I don't know how much that helped. The attempt was there.
Yeah, it breaks my heart because I heard a terrible story. I don't know if it's true, but I heard like 30 years later, Bob Geldof, I think he admitted that all they know is that they had untold millions of dollars worth of aid that were bringing by truck to feed people, and they were stopped by very bad dudes that looked like corn pops with AK-47.
Corn pop, Biden's guy.
And I'm sure it was I'm sure they weren't willing to struggle that one out, make sure it goes to the right people, and so they're just and they walked away, man, and gave.
Yeah, sure. What could you do? And if you feed people for a period of time,
probably entered into the black market, right?
You give someone fish, they eat for a day. Show them how to fish, they'll eat for eternity or for the life that they live.
Yeah.
It's a daunting situation.
All right, so that's my point. So you have what's called a cosmopolitan perspective that actually takes people irrespective of the political culture or societies that they belong to. That is to say, like the idea, at least morally speaking, of a borderless world, and asks the question and begs the question: what obligation do we have to people who are suffering?
I don't believe in a borderless world.
Simply by dint of their suffering, I think it is. I think that makes more sense to say it that way, regardless of what culture or where in the world they may exist, versus what's called a political model that's championed by people like John Rawls. The first one is championed by people like Charles Bates and Peter Singer, and the political model by people like John Rawls, that there's a special relationship that you enter into in a political situation, that there's a special relationship of citizens qua each other, qua citizens, that we owe first to each other as part of the same political project, and secondly, maybe vastly secondly, to the rest of the world. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I mean, to what extent? I mean, that's the argument.
Yeah,
you want to give as much as you can and help as much as you can, to the extent that you don't become overburdened to the point where you can't have a strong home. Meaning you're not operating from a position of power.
Yeah,
you don't want.
Yeah, but let me just say, so the notion of building our obligations by way of our closeness, our affinity, it's not just geographical affinity, but it seems to be political, cultural affinity, okay, or legal affinity. We're part of some sort of a constitutional framework. And so the idea is that we owe first to the poorest of the poor in LA and in San Francisco, and then secondly to the rest of the world. Anyway, let me just say, there's another philosopher who, they all died around the same time. They all died like at the turn of the century, ironic enough, all these great philosophers. One was Bernard Williams, and out of the United Kingdom, out of Balliol College, Oxford. And he said, he was championing the idea of our own personal projects as a way of informing the level of obligation we owe to one another. And he gave a wonderful analogy. On a sinking ship, that person who thinks about saving that equally drowning stranger to his own wife has one thought too many. The idea being, you save your wife first, and then you try to save.
Familiarity means something. You want to save someone that you're close to.
Well, yeah. Well, I think the analogy is to people who are part of the same family or tribe, and that's the whole idea of being part of the same
ethics class. I had a teacher who proposed that question. The question was, you see someone drowning in a lake right in front of you.
Yeah.
Would you rather help that person, or you send $100, and this is factual, you feed 5 people in an impoverished country for a year. What would you rather do? Save that one person in front of you, or save 5 people for at least a year? They're going to eat, they're going to be fine.
Wow.
It's full.
That's difficult.
So Yeah, well, the question is, then he was great. He was a guy from the Grand Concourse, actually.
Oh, wow, nice.
A professor at NYU, and he
Nice.
would bring up all these, examples of.
What was his name?
I could look him up, but an ethics class, and we would say, "Wow, these scenarios are odd."
Ronald's working.
Well, yeah.
Jeremy Waldron. No, I'm just joking.
He would say like this, like, "Would you rather you could press a button and your wife's leg gets cut off, or you have that, or you see two babies drown in a lake? You could save them. What would you rather have? Two deaths on your hand, or you're now married to a diagonal, a woman without a right leg, let's say, and a left arm, your wife." And we were like, "Wow, these are odd examples." And he would go like this, Chris. He'd go, "Look, yes, I'm freakishly intelligent." Touch his face, and he'd be like doing that for like 5 minutes. So that was like a paper I wrote.
It was like Woody Allen, actually, man.
Does spatial is that the argument?
Does spatiality make a difference? Does geography make a difference?
Sure, it does, because it's
orbit. In terms of the orbit of obligation, I don't know.
Right.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Right.
These are difficult questions. But let me just say, for the first cosmopolitan point of view, the borderless point of view, philosophers like Peter Singer were accused of having, I'm sure he would accept that and champion it. He was accused of having a flat moral landscape, which is
what does that mean?
Which means only simply in virtue of people's needs, are we obligated? I think that's what he was trying to say, and not in terms of anything
Basic
else.
Needs, you mean?
Sure. I mean, we're talking about getting people out of crushing poverty. Now, what scares me is people like Peter Singer, they go beyond that, and they go from absolute levels of poverty to relative poverty. And then we talk about, because, lives in a Tudor mansion.
No, as Thomas Sowell says,
there is no pain, and so we should all live in Tudor mansions, from, Somalia here.
As Thomas Sowell says, there is no relative poverty in America. Don't get me wrong. People have crushing issues that they have to face. But compare our poor in America, they would be the rich in Mexico or in most of these countries. He's saying most people have air conditioning. I know it sounds silly. Most people have $1,000 phone. Most people have a car, shelter. They eat every day. That's considered living okay.
So let's bring this home. So when it comes to what Sanders is proposing, you never quite know. You never nail them down because they want to get the vote first. Then they're going to screw you later. You know it, and I know it. Okay. All right. Well, but so far as his statements and so far as published things, especially things that are recent. For example, he's championing the Green New Deal, for goodness sake. And Andrew Yang is on board. Yang might be his VP. You don't know.
Let me give you some facts here, okay? This is from the City Journal, came out yesterday. Eye on the News, Brian Riedel. Actually wrote this October 15, 2019. He's talking about Sanders in the race, so this is October. He's talking about his policy. Yeah. You could say whatever you want with beautiful, flowery words like Cornel West. What does it mean? What does it translate to? Because, we could say, and America was never a land of freedom. America never, fulfilled its promise or what have you. Right. Here we go. He's saying, all told, Sanders' current plans would cost as much as $97.5 trillion over the next decade. And total government spending at all levels would surge to as high as 70% of GDP.
Oh my goodness.
Approximately half of the American workforce will be employed by the government, because he talks about some sort of program where everyone will at least get a guaranteed government job. Yeah. The 10-year budget deficit would approach $90 trillion. Yeah. With annual deficits exceeding 30% of GDP. Yeah. And he says most of the costs of Sanders' three most ambitious proposals is his Medicare for All plan that will increase federal spending between 30 and 40 trillion over a 10-year period. He pledges 16.13 trillion on his climate plan and his proposal to guarantee all Americans a full-time government job paying $15 an hour.
I don't get it. I don't get it.
Is estimated to cost $30 trillion.
I don't understand.
You know what a lot of economists say?
What?
I was listening to one economist. His name escapes me.
Yeah.
He said, this is what he said, if I said it correctly.
Tell me.
And I'll get the name for you. He said, companies don't pay taxes. This is what he said. He said they just pass it on to the consumer.
Yeah.
So
it's called, there's a word for it. It's called a compensating wage differential or something.
Okay, but hold on. So he's saying,
but let me just say, that's bad economics. I mean, if we're going to say, was it Krugman who said this? Who gets
No, it wasn't Krugman.
Because it has to do with the, okay, it's probably, what's his name? Robert Reich.
Not right.
We've been arguing with on Facebook, right? Here is Robert Reich. But anyway,
the point
I'm just saying, doesn't it have to do with the elasticity of demand? It has to do with, how much of a knock do companies get in terms of the demand for their products if they increase their price? That is, if they pass on the price to their consumers.
Oh, supply and demand, sure.
No. It has to do with the elasticity of demand. That's the notion.
Okay,
how sensitive is their demand for their product with respect to unit increases in price? That's right.
Hence the Cabbage Patch craze. People wanted the Cabbage Patch doll, right? I remember this with our cousin. So it went up about 3 times or 4 times the price because the demand was there, right?
No, you're talking about something different.
Okay, all right.
No problem.
Hold on here.
Yeah.
Now he's talking about a $15 an hour basic minimum wage. Okay. The argument that some economists like Sol have is that a minimum wage is a detriment to society.
Why is that? Because it increases unemployment, right?
Yes, he says it increases unemployment, and those that need experience to move on and move up in their careers, they want to get employed. So to put pressure on a company to say, you got to pay me $20 an hour, they're going to hire less people, and less people are going to get experience. And for some odd reason, Sol also says in the long term or in the short term, minimum wage, when there weren't minimum wage laws, the minimum wage of the average person was higher than what the minimum wage would have been. I mean, economics is very complicated. So
No, it's not. That's the funny thing. I think it's rather.
It is complicated.
You think so? No, I think it's.
How do we have someone like Bernie Sanders pulling the wool over people's eyes?
Because
how do we have? Hold on. How do we have this chasm of people saying, "Look how good we're doing"?
Yeah, I'll tell you why.
Go ahead.
Because the mortal words of James Carville, we've lost our damn minds. That's why. Right. And also, in the immortal words of John Maynard when he was advising FDR and his brain trust at the beginning of the New Deal, he said he was surprised at the lack of economic literacy of FDR himself. The truth is that people are not educated enough in terms of basic principles and basic understandings. And not only that, relating in a reasonable way, a reasonable view of the truth. That is to say, facts. Real facts as facts, and relating them to what we know in terms of history about economic behavior. Okay?
Well, even
that amount to certain general principle of like supply and demand. I'm sorry. I mean, look. Just to give you an example in terms of common sense. If, for example, raising the minimum wage means nothing, then why raise it to 15? Let's raise it to 25. If not, let's raise it to 50. Right? If that's what it's all about.
Right, or if taxes are so good, there's no economic at 100%.
Yeah, there you go. If there's no economic downside to raising minimum wage, then why don't we go ad infinitum here? To actually allow the poorest of the poor to be as rich as Bloomberg or Trump. That doesn't make any sense. Obviously not, because there's certain laws that cut against that. I had an economist, I think there was an op-ed piece on the front page of the New York Times like 2 weeks ago that said, no, taxes, decreasing taxes on the rich have no economic benefit. Well, if that's the case, then let's actually raise their taxes to 90%, 95%. If that's the case, let's see what happens.
Thomas Sowell said that when he researched all of the administrations in the 20th century, when taxes were lowest, for the upper 5 to 10%,
Yeah.
the government got the most tax revenue.
Well, let me just say.
Did you hear what I said? You would think it'd be the opposite.
Oh, okay.
That if they tax the rich the most, government would have the most tax revenues.
Yeah.
It was the opposite.
Yeah, I know. That's actually what Bannon said on Bill Maher's show, Politically Incorrect, which actually is a misnomer. It should be called Politically Correct. What Bannon is offering is politically incorrect because it's not popular, but it's correct.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. So in the end, he said, well, Trump is raising the deficit. I thought actually you guys, were fighting against the deficit under Obama. And he said, well, because of the growth of the economy, which is historic. It's breaking record after record after record, that actually the country will receive more tax revenues in the end. And everyone in the audience laughed because they have no common sense. And maybe it's not even common sense. That's a little bit different.
It's just knowledge.
Have a historic, a knowledge of the history of economies. That's what I'm trying to say.
May I say something? You're correct, because I was taught, and I'm sure you were taught, that FDR was responsible for getting us out of the Depression.
Yeah.
Thomas Sowell, and I believe Friedman might have been the first to say this, said FDR prolonged the Depression with his tariffs, the Hart-Smalley tariff. But that's why Sowell was concerned with Trump currently and his tariffs with China. He didn't want that to happen or duplicate a situation like that.
Let me just say,
but hold on, with FDR's interventions with tariffs and other things, I believe increasing taxes as well, and some other things he did, the Depression was prolonged for I think 10 years.
Yeah.
Sowell talks about this because of government intervention. Actually, unemployment was going down under Hoover, and it peaked under FDR.
I've been at more than one university.
But we're told other things.
As a faculty member, without naming names.
Please.
But with all due, I've been at 2 well-known universities, and the faculty, the august faculty members who are teaching economics, as they're like the resident expert on economics, but they swing left ideologically. I mean, what's the point of getting a PhD in economics if you have no common sense? So I was complaining about Obama doubling the debt within 2-3 years.
Yeah, I believe 9 trillion.
From 9 to like 20 trillion, something like that. Okay.
Yes.
I thought that was, and
from 11 to like 9, I think 11 to 20.
And within like 2 or so years, amassing more debt than all the, 43 presidents before him.
Yes, combined. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah. And they said, and their argument was, we don't have to worry about the debt. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have to worry about the debt? Okay. There's something, this is running afoul of common sense here. What do you mean?
Well, and that doesn't even.
Well, that Americans can just, increase the debt, as much as they like, because it has no impact on any economic variables in the end. I'm like, what?
Well, that doesn't even include, they say, the true debt, about $150 trillion.
Oh, because that includes, I think, private and public debt, I think.
Well, it has to do with unpaid debt that we can't cover. I believe pension plans and a lot of other things.
Oh yeah, you mean promise debt? Promised in the future. Yeah.
But okay. Trump is even going at, I believe,
and I don't think that includes. That doesn't include personal debt as well too. That doesn't include personal debt as well too that people have, right?
Well, I don't know, but Trump is even increasing the debt at a higher rate than Obama. But from what I've learned. Yeah. He's doing that because he put a lot of money. Most of it's going into the military.
Well,
rebuild the military.
Okay, well, it begs the question of where Obama's money went. I have no idea where that money was spent. All I know is that I get quite angry, but I'm a Christian, so I don't get too angry. That they had spent $5 billion on a website that didn't work or didn't work well for Obamacare.
Oh yeah, that's
true. He spent $5 billion.
Well, the $500 million he gave to his friends at Solyndra, which I believe never took off or never.
Oh, okay, yeah, exactly, Solyndra, right? No one talked about that, right?
Talking about Saul, you sent me a video. There's no repercussions for the leftists when they do something wrong.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
There's no repercussions.
And the funny thing is, there was a primary software company that said, I could have done a better job for $3 million, okay?
Yeah.
So, like a factor by like 1,000. plus, okay?
Right.
$5 billion for a website that didn't really even work well, for goodness sake. I don't know where that money went. I can't understand any of that. But anyway, there we go. So let me just say, I had this argument with them, and they were like, the debt doesn't matter. So their theory is because since the primary currency in the world is the American dollar, so I guess it's an exception for Americans, that the world is forced to buy dollars, and so America could just print dollars as much as they like to cover their debt. I'm like, but then by that logic, why increase the debt to 20 trillion? Why don't we increase the debt to 100 trillion, like actually the horror story that we're seeing now? Well, I would like to bring these economists in here to tell me that it still doesn't matter. Okay, let's multiply that 100 trillion and put another zero on top of that. Isn't there something called like inflation that we have to worry about at some point? The confidence on the economy. Would you say the confidence on the currency? I mean, is it going to? Are we going to have to pay that back at some point? Is it going to erode? At some point, won't the bubble burst because of an erosion of confidence? I mean, give me a break already.
Yeah, and I just want to add, we were talking
common sense.
The Pope and Bernie Sanders, who are painting a picture as though Western democracies have failed. We are all living in the end times, and that people are dying in the street.
Well, I kind of believe that, but go ahead.
Well, I'm saying in financial terms that people don't have medicine. There's no water flowing. There's no opportunity. We go into Steven Pinker's book, Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress. And his theme of his book is that reason, science, humanism all lead to progress. And he basically says we have to keep this up. Of course, in almost every aspect, GDP per person, quality of life, happiness, calories consumed by an individual, peace in our time, every known metric we have improved exponentially.
Yeah, of course.
And he's saying this is all because of the key themes of the Enlightenment.
But I'm going to balance out against my perspective. And the perspective is, look, going back to how we began, when I walk through the streets of Paris, and it breaks my heart because these are people of color who tell me this. You should have seen Paris the way it was only a couple of decades ago. What a difference. How sophisticated it was, how beautiful.
Just a couple of decades ago, huh?
Yes, this woman said she came here 30 years ago. That's not too long ago. What a dramatic difference. To walk around and among and almost stepping over the great unwashed masses. That's exactly what we have here. And you have to figure that it's been an engineered decline.
Yeah.
Opening up the floodgates to the truly disadvantaged from every portion of the world to come to our countries, and particularly to flood into these cities, already burdened public institutions. It's unbelievable.
Now, is this a massive plan by Marxists to destroy the West?
I think so. I think they did plan to destroy the world and then to recreate it, sow havoc, to sow discontent, and then to offer the solution. And invariably, the solution is going to be against the fundamental rights of individuals, of liberty of conscience, of speech, of thought, and so on and so forth.
Savage said the Verona Papers, which came out, I believe, in the 70s, confirmed that the communists were infiltrating Hollywood, all of our universities, and every other walk of life. I need to get those, the Verona Papers. These were papers that were taken from the communist government of the Soviet Union, and it confirmed everything that the FBI director was saying in the 50s.
I'm just saying,
it's so obvious. I could see this.
Yes, I'm just saying. So balancing out against the optimism you have in terms of on economic terms, on social terms, I think it's a terrible mistake. Like, for example, is Sanders and the socialists, who are really as much communist as you could possibly have within.
Sure, whatever term you want to use.
And God knows once they gain power, how far they can take the absurdity.
That's the scariness. That's what makes it scary.
What I'm asking is, do they stop at the point of simply some baseline, getting people out of extremists? So, some absolute baseline of need? Do they go beyond that, like I said, to get people to have two cars in a garage and that being the baseline, and everything is relative to one another. So
No,
the top and bringing up the bottom. No, the answer is probably yes. They probably are
I
promoting.
think it's much worse than that, Chris.
I think they are promoting that. But what they're doing is, I cannot stand, on top of all of this, the return to Nazi logic in terms of eugenics. We could talk about this. There's a viable program of eugenics that's happening here in terms of killing certain unwanted babies of a certain ethnicity and certain class, socioeconomic class, in the womb before they have even a chance.
Can I say one thing?
Well, let me say, to genetic manipulation of the human genome in order to create a super species and splicing in aspects of the animal kingdom. Let me just finish. Perverting the culture, and there's actually a seething hatred for anything that's European or Caucasian and male and heterosexual, and God forbid.
Well, if you hear.
Let me say, and God forbid successful and Christian, which is say the 5 things why people, really hate a person like Donald Trump. Hey, let me just say something. For Black History Month, I don't know if you caught this, someone put up a post on Twitter that for Black History Month, punch a white person in the face, beat up a white person, and it got 320,000 thumbs up. And it wasn't doxxed. It was not doxxed. It wasn't censored. God forbid we post what we're saying now. Anything we're saying now, this would be censored immediately.
Yeah. I mean, that's obvious. There's an all-out assault on European culture, especially white men. Mm-hmm. I'm Puerto Rican. I don't know. I could get punched in the face. My skin is light, I guess. Mm-hmm. I might be looked upon as a European. It is scary. It's telling, to the point you have Biden running for president said,
you said that you
hold on, let me say
you combine Biden and Obama. You said Biden.
Biden said, he lost New Hampshire and Iowa. That's fine, but those places are pale. And now we go to South Carolina, where we have the Black support, African American support.
Well,
for him just to say that is shocking. It's over the top, and it tells you where they are. As far as what is a long-term goal?
Let me just interject for a moment. I think actually Biden has so lost it, he thinks that Corn Pop's, buddies are probably going to vote for him in South Carolina.
Yeah. If Corn Pop's going to get his crew back.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
You dog-faced pony something.
What was that all about? I don't even know.
He's definitely senile, but he's so entertaining.
But you like him, though.
No, I'm laughing at him.
I like him more than Sanders, and Warren is the worst of the lot, by the way.
Well, let me just finish here.
Yeah.
Let me finish.
Okay.
I was listening to Michael Savage yesterday, and I think he's correct. The long-term goal of someone like Bernie is to have someone like AOC. He didn't say this. I'm guessing. Yeah. To be his own Che Guevara. This one is angry. She knows nothing. Right. She'll line you up and I think there's a potential where she'll just line people up and say, no, you're part of the problem. You have to go. Can't you picture her saying that? Like
the Protestants are very clear. The Catholics, they have their own, problems. They have their own civil war that they're fighting here, right? Modernist, traditionalists. But let me tell you, the Protestants, there are a lot of outspoken Protestants that are very clear that it is true that there are FEMA camps, and they're just waiting for the right opportunity on a false flag or
Protestants say this?
A real catastrophe, of course. And they combine that with
I didn't know it was Protestant.
Some alien disclosure that might be part of it. Then that connects with New Age, with the New Age movement, that these are our ascended masters. Our true messiahs are going to lead us out of the medieval mentality that actually the Judeo-Christian Christians have actually the ideological box that they put us in, and they're going to liberate us from that. And of course, the Christians believe that that's the Antichrist and the apocalypse. But they're very convinced. Forget about the theological part. That there are FEMA camps, and they will take away our guns. Number one, and then number two, there you go. Right?
Yeah, they want to take away our guns,
and then they're going to march us into these camps
on Western culture as well.
Yep.
The Marxists are here now. They're fighting. They're no longer hiding. They're telling you.
I think we're in a lot of trouble. First of all, I don't think we're assuming that actually it's going to be a fair election. They're going to get every felon and everyone, half-baked, half-educated person who's angry, jealous, and lazy, as they say, to vote for free money, which is essentialist, and to vote out of existence whitey. That's what it's all about. White, hetero, Christian-esque,
And it's not even if Trump wins. Just the fact that we have Marxists who can win, who are running for president, should behoove every individual. And we always said, what happens after Trump?
Yeah. Well, let me say, if Sanders picks up the right running mate who connects with the intersectionality of, at least of about 50% of the American public, maybe 60%, he's done. Right. If Michelle Obama says yes, Trump is probably. Well, you never know. I mean, don't.
He's not going to want to be a VP, dude.
Don't know. Why?
Because she is a marquee name that's not going to take second.
Got it. Sanders. Well, with all due respect, she's young, and Sanders is not. Sanders is a bad heart. You think they don't calculate those type of things? And then for her to run, at the top of the ticket in another 4 years?
I don't think.
Okay. Well, aside from her, if AOC,
I said as
but she's not of the right age. She's not of the right age.
38.
I don't think I think she's below the age requirement.
Don't you have to be 38?
Oh, shoot. Then it should be AOC. It probably would be AOC.
36 you have to.
Kamala Harris is another one. That's a possibility. Camel Toe Harris.
Just blew a gasket in a primary. She's not going to.
I know that, but it doesn't matter. We're talking about you just pushing the button of the woke, non.
I don't think Kamala Harris has a shot right now.
Okay, anything that's not white, old, rich men who are heteros. I'm telling you.
Well, AOC, even
that's a possibility. Yeah.
Did you hear that article at Harvard and Yale?
What?
They didn't report that they were they received about $350 million. From overseas countries like Saudi Arabia, China, and other countries.
Why?
I don't know.
To pervert research, to pervert economic facts, as we suggested.
And a professor, I believe, had to step down at Harvard because he had connections with China that he wasn't telling us. You heard about that, right?
Yeah, of course. I could tell you a lot of things.
Scary, huh?
Well, yeah, I think let's leave it for the next one because I want to talk about leftist lunacy and just like a laundry list of lies that were lies from when Trump got into office that have resurfaced, and lies over just only the last 3 weeks. Like right now, Pelosi and the Democrats leadership are perpetuating the falsehood. We're talking about economics, economic common sense, that it's actually that the Trump economy is not so good.
Right. Now they're saying it's not so good.
Wait. Oh, no. But if it is good, it's because of Obama's policies, not because
Well, they took credit for it being good. Now they're saying it's not good.
Really? This is right out of a page. Yet again, I mean, Winston. I mean, goodness. 2 + 2 = 3. And then if they like, 2 + 2 may equal 4. And then if they want, 2 + 2 = 5. And then they could say that we're increasing chocolate rations when in fact they're decreasing chocolate. And that our real enemy is Eurasia, not Eurafrica. I mean, we're
constantly at war.
But it's unbelievable because people are really buying into the falsehoods. For them to say that Biden Jr., logically speaking, is not relevant to the impeachment hearing, I feel like I'm going crazy. And these are seasoned lawyers, legally trained people,
that's what they do. They lie.
Yale and Harvard Law School who say stuff.
They lie. They're not told to tell the truth.
The Mitt Romney.
That's the problem with some of these lawyers.
Crazy. Okay.
Well, they twisted.
And actually, then to tell the whole world and to say that there's an asterisk on his acquittal, Trump's acquittal, because obviously the Senate was partisan because they didn't allow, and it was against the due process. First, the due process applies to the criminally accused, not the opposite. The due process of the Democrats that they didn't allow any witnesses, but they never mentioned that in the House they had 18 witnesses and they had thousands of documents and they had, oh my goodness, and honor, and we never had a chance to cross-examine any of those witnesses. And there's been, Star Chamber hearings.
Really alarming.
Crazy.
We know that the Democrats are just lying. They're doing anything to suit their long-term goal, to sully his reputation, to impeach him, to have a cloud over Trump. My question is, when is the Barr and Durham reports coming out? And is something going to happen?
No, they're suppressing it before the election. It may come out. They want to see who's going to win, I think. Unless I don't think Trump has as much influence.
Because my question to you is,
the bureaucracy is fighting back, the swamp is fighting back, and
my question to you is,
fight going on, and they're winning. Look how he can't even open his mouth. Let me just say, open his mouth about a palpable injustice against Roger Stone. Does anyone know really what his crime is? Because I can't even figure that one out. Go ahead.
I think he lied to Congress.
Why? No, I've been hearing a couple of things, like simply because he tried to reach out to Julian Assange about what? Yet again, about corruption. So it's like back to the
tampering situation. Yeah, tampering with the witness.
No, so by the way, then they interviewed the witness, and the witness said, no, that didn't happen. So there you go.
Once again, you can't get frustrated. They lie. So you're trying to put an honest, reasonable twist on what is going on. They're not telling the truth. They're lying. Mm-hmm. So my question is this: is William Barr and the Durham report, in addition to what Horowitz said when it came out, Horowitz acted like, nothing big here, nothing to see. Then when they went down the line and Cruz spoke to him, he said, these are gross injustices. This isn't, this is horrific. It shows bias by the FBI. Yeah. So I am curious to see if Barr and Durham are willing to put skin in the game, meaning are they willing to risk their future and be under this microscope of scrutiny if they find out wrongdoing, which Barr said a couple months ago, of course Trump was spied on. So where do we go from there?
Okay, well, I'm going to answer this with my understanding of the situation. I think there's of course, a civil war going on within the deepest, the most shallow and the deepest levels of the bureaucracy. I think the answer is probably nothing's going to happen. The smart money is nothing is going to happen, particularly before the election. Now, after the election, even if Barr and Durham they come out with something that's damning, it's going to be so suppressed by the media. Because the media makes the truth, so far as
just like the Horowitz report,
minds are concerned. At least half of the country's minds, or maybe 70% of the country's minds are concerned. You have to understand they're philosophically predisposed to the idea that there is no truth as such. This is straight out of a page of Nietzsche, of Marx, and so on.
Fake news.
No, but actually, there is no fake news from their perspective. The only fake news is anything that's against the ends of socialism itself. That's the only thing. And everything is justified in light of actually the ends of socialism or communism. Okay, and that's what it's all about. And so that's the idea that actually all truth is within the mind, but even more so that all truth is within the mind about its true collective interest, which once again goes back to these Marxist principles. And there's no truth outside that stands outside of human experience, which people from a religious bent would say otherwise. And that's why they feel justified, and if you believe that, then you partake in the orgy.
Yeah, it goes back to
lies.
It goes back to that professor in the 60s, Marcuse. How do you pronounce his name?
Sure.
Okay, who said free speech is fine unless you're a fascist.
Yep.
So you label Trump a fascist. Yep. Anything he says, is wrong. Right. Whatever means necessary to get him out, make up lies, do this, shoot him, do this, it's okay to do those things because it justifies getting rid of this fascist, this Nazi. So, but
okay, I think we should tie this in here and let's leave on a good note here, man. Hey, happy Valentine's Day.
Hey, you too.
Yeah, man. Valentine's Day. Do you have a love interest in mind here or what?
I'm going down to a movie. Gonna eat something and have a good time. What about you?
Yeah, got the flowers going. Got the chocolate and the flowers going. Yeah, man. I'm a romantic,
Yeah, no, that's a good thing, man. That's a good thing. Cool. I just hope Barr and Durham, I hate to bring it up again after you said Happy Valentine's Day. I hope something's done. I mean, the thing with Stone is he's going to jail for lying under oath, supposedly. And you have all these people, as Trump said, who lied under oath.
Yep.
I mean, what's going on?
You know what's going on. I mean, just opening his mouth, just making a little tweet in support of a person who's facing a terribly unjust situation, 9 years. Well, that's essentially a death sentence for Roger Stone for crimes that are relatively minor. Actually, crimes that are species to begin with, and jurors that look compromised. I mean, unbelievable. What can I tell you? And people are thinking about.
Let's examine it next time.
They're thinking about another round of impeachment because he tweeted something. And people love it. Oh, let's impeach him. The frat brothers of the world who are lawyers who seem to
unbelievable
from the rose-colored lenses of
those guys don't want truth. You know, Democrat good, Republican bad. They've always felt this way.
Yeah.
You know? Meanwhile, they live the most conservative ways. You know.
Yep.
Right? These guys go into Ivy League schools. They get married, have kids, buy a house.
Right.
That's not the liberal way. You know.
Yeah. Well, the truth shall set ye free, and woe unto those.
All right.
Pervert, right? Truth for falsehood, light for darkness. See you soon, all right? Hey, buy flowers, man.
God bless. I will.
Buy flowers.
God bless.
Peace in the Middle East.